Warning, this story contains extreme violence, slasher elements, and murder. I encourage you to listen to the entire story, and if you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe and press the bell icon to stay updated. But that was before I met Emma. Or rather, before I swiped right on her. It was a Saturday night, and like most weekends, I was aimlessly swiping through Tinder. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a bit of fun to pass the time. That's when I came across her profile. Emma, 25, just a few miles away. Her picture was captivating, long, dark hair, pale skin, and eyes that seemed to draw you in. Her bio was simple, looking for someone to die for. I chuckled. Dark sense of humor, I thought. Without giving it much thought, I swiped right. Almost immediately. It was a match. Hey, I typed, not expecting much. A reply came within seconds. Hey there. Up for some fun tonight? She was direct, and I liked that. We chatted for a bit, her response is always quick, as if she was waiting for me to message. There was something unsettling about how she talked, though. Her words were flirtatious but carried an odd undertone, like she knew more about me than she should. Let's meet, she suggested after a short exchange. Sure, where? I replied, I know a place. Meet me at the old cemetery on Willow Street. Midnight, a chill ran down my spine. A cemetery? That's a bit unconventional. You scared? She teased. Of course not, I shot back, trying to keep my bravado intact. But the truth was, the idea of meeting someone in a cemetery in the dead of night was unnerving. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed. As midnight approached, I found myself driving to Willow Street. The closer I got, the more my anxiety grew. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Finally, I arrived at the cemetery. It was an old, decrepit place, with crumbling tombstones, cold night air. There was no sign of anyone else. Emma? I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. I'm here, a voice whispered from the darkness. I turned, and there she was, standing by an ancient-looking tombstone. She was just as beautiful as her picture, but there was something off about her. Her skin was almost too pale, her eyes too hollow. You came, she said, a strange smile playing on her lips. Yeah, well, I'm a man of my word, I replied, trying to sound confident. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. Do you know why I chose this place? No, why? Because it's where I died, she whispered. Her smile widening into something sinister. I laughed nervously, expecting her to join in. But she didn't. Her eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking. That's when I noticed it, the way her breath didn't fog in the cold air, the way the wind didn't seem to move her hair. That's a good joke, Emma, I said, my voice trembling. It's not a joke, she replied, her voice cold and distant. I died here 2 years ago. Murdered by someone I met on Tinder. My heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be real. It had to be some sick prank. I don't believe you, I stammered, stepping back. You should, she said, her expression turning deadly serious. I was buried right here, in this grave. She pointed to the tombstone beside her. Against my better judgment, I looked. The name on the tombstone was Emma. The dates matched what she had told me. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a coincidence. I've been waiting for someone like you, she continued, her voice now a haunting whisper. Someone who can help me find peace. How? What do you want from me? I asked, panic rising in my throat. I want you to find him. The one who killed me. Make him pay. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. Into mine. You'll know when the time comes. before I could respond, the air around me grew colder, and the darkness seemed to close in. Emma's form began to fade, becoming more transparent by the second. "Wait. Don't leave." I cried out, but it was too late. She was gone, leaving me alone in the cemetery, shivering with fear and confusion. I stood there for what felt like hours, trying to process what had just happened. Had I really just spoken to a ghost? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? I rushed back to my car and drove home, the image of Emma's grave etched in my mind. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice. I became obsessed with finding out more about her death. I searched online, combed through old news articles, and finally found what I was looking for. Emma had indeed been murdered 2 years ago. Her killer was never caught. The police had no leads, and the case went cold, but now I had a lead, Emma herself. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find messages on my phone, messages from Emma's Tinder profile. But when I'd open the app, they'd be gone. I'd see her in my dreams, always standing by her grave, always whispering the same words, "Find him." It became clear that I had no choice. I had to find her killer. I started retracing her steps, going to the places she had been seen before her death, talking to people who knew her. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered, a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal, and then, one night, I found him. The man who had taken her life. He was someone she had matched with on Tinder, just like me. But unlike me, he was a predator, a monster hiding behind a charming smile. I confronted him, and as I did, I felt Emma's presence beside me. In that moment, I realized what Emma wanted me to do, make him pay. She whispered in my ear, her voice cold and unforgiving, and I did. The details of what happened next are a blur, lost in a haze of rage and vengeance. When it was over, the man lay dead at my feet, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. As I stood there, covered in his blood, I heard Emma's voice one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, her tone soft and relieved. And then, just like that, she was gone. I should have felt guilty, horrified by what I had done. But I didn't. Instead, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, like I had done what was right. I had avenged Emma, and in doing so, had freed her spirit, but as the days went by, that peace began to erode. I started seeing her again, not in dreams, but in the real world. In reflections, in shadows, always watching me, her eyes filled with a sorrow I couldn't understand. It was then that I realized the truth. I hadn't freed her. I had bound her to me, to my own darkness. And now, I was the one haunted, the one who couldn't escape. Emma is still with me, every day, every night. And I know now that there's no escape, no redemption. I'm trapped in. I wasn't rid of her, I had simply become her new obsession. It started subtly, just a flicker in the corner of my eye, a shadow where there shouldn't have been one. But soon, it escalated. I'd catch glimpses of her reflection in mirrors, her pale face staring back at me from behind my own. Sometimes she'd be standing at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep. But when I'd blink, she'd vanish, leaving only the coldness in the air as proof that she had been there. Everywhere I went, I felt her presence. In the shower, I'd feel the brush of cold fingers on my skin, though I was alone. I stopped using the bathroom mirror altogether, afraid of what I might see. My phone became a cursed object. Whenever I picked it up, her Tinder profile would appear on the screen, her dead eyes staring into mine. It didn't matter if I deleted the app, her profile always returned, haunting me through the digital world, a ghost in the machine. One night, after days without sleep, I tried to drown my fear in alcohol. It didn't help. The more I drank, the closer she seemed. I stumbled into my bedroom, the world spinning around me, and collapsed onto the bed. That's when I heard it, her voice, clear and sharp, slicing through the haze. "Do you miss me?" she whispered. My heart nearly stopped. I bolted upright, searching the room, but there was no one there. I was alone. And then, just as I was about to dismiss it as a drunken hallucination, I felt a hand on my chest, icy and weightless. "You can't get rid of me," she hissed in my ear. I screamed, leaping off the bed, swatting at empty air. The hand was gone, but the feeling lingered, cold and dreadful. I knew then that she wasn't just haunting me, she was inside me, a parasite feeding on my fear and guilt. I needed help. I couldn't go to the police, they'd never believe me. They'd think I was insane. Answers, searching forums on the dark web, looking for anyone who might know how to deal with a vengeful spirit. I found him late one night, in a dark corner of the internet where the desperate go to find the unthinkable. His name was Ezekiel, a self-proclaimed exorcist for the digital age. His services weren't cheap, but at this point, I didn't care. I contacted him, explaining my situation. He replied almost instantly. "Bring your phone," he wrote. "She's tied to it. We'll need to sever the connection." I met Ezekiel in an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the walls are stained with graffiti and the floors are littered with broken glass. He was an odd-looking man, with wild, unkempt hair and eyes that gleamed with a mix of madness and intelligence. "You've pissed off something real nasty," he said, glancing at my phone. "This isn't just a ghost. It's something worse." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "She's not just a spirit. She's a revenant, a soul so consumed by rage and sorrow that it claws its way back from death, driven by a single purpose. In your case, that purpose is you." "But I helped her," I protested. "I found her killer." Ezekiel shook his head. "Revenants don't care about justice. They care about revenge, and once they get a taste of it, they're never satisfied. She's latched onto you because you're the one who gave her that satisfaction. Now, she'll keep feeding off you until there's nothing left." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So what do I do?" "There's only one way to sever a revenant's connection," he said, pulling out a small, ornate dagger. "We have to destroy the object that ties her to this world. In this case, it's your phone. But that's not enough. You'll need to confront her, make her believe that you're stronger than she is." Oh, this was madness. But then again, so was everything that had happened since that night in the cemetery. Ezekiel began the ritual, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The air around us grew thick, the shadows in the room deepening, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. As he chanted, he handed me the dagger. "Cut yourself," he instructed. "Draw blood, and offer it to her. It's the only way to lure her out." I swallowed hard, the blade trembling in my hand. With a deep breath, I sliced a shallow cut across my palm, wincing as the blood welled up. I held my hand out, letting the blood drip onto the floor. "Emma," I called out. My voice shaking. "I know you're here. Show yourself." For a moment, nothing happened. The room was deathly silent, save for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then, she appeared, her form materializing out of the shadows. But this time, she was different, no longer the beautiful girl I had swiped right on. Her skin was mottled and decayed, her eyes hollow pits of darkness, her mouth twisted into a snarl. "You think you can escape me?" she hissed, her voice a low growl that sent shivers down my spine. "I helped you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I did what you wanted. Now you need to leave me alone." She laughed, a chilling sound that echoed off the walls. "Leave you alone? I'm not done with you. You think killing him was enough? There's still so much more you can do for me." So much pain we can inflict together. I shook my head, backing away. No. I won't do it, then you'll die, she snarled, her form lunging toward me, her fingers outstretched like claws. Now. Ezekiel shouted. With all the strength I could muster, I plunged the dagger into my phone, shattering the screen. There was a blinding flash of light, and for a moment, I thought I was going to be torn apart. Her form flickering, her face contorting with rage and fear. No, she screamed, her voice echoing as her body began to dissolve into smoke. You can't escape me. You're mine, I watched, breathless, as she disintegrated, her screams fading into the darkness. And then, she was gone. The room was silent, the air no longer heavy with her presence. Ezekiel slumped against the wall, exhausted. It's done, he said, panting. She's gone. For now, for now. I asked, dread curling in my gut. He nodded. Revenants are stubborn. If you ever give her a reason, she might come back. But for now, you're free. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was emptiness. The thought of her returning, of going through all of this again, was unbearable. But there was nothing I could do about it. I thanked Ezekiel and left the building, the shattered remnants of my phone clutched in my hand. As I walked into the night, I tried to convince myself that it was over, that I could move on, but as I passed by a dark alley, my phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart skipped a beat. I had destroyed it, there was no way it could still work. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and looked at the screen. There, in the middle of the shattered glass, was a notification, new match, Emma, 25, just a few miles away. The screen flickered, and then her face appeared, her eyes dead and lifeless. Her smile wide and twisted. I dropped the phone, stumbling back, my mind racing with terror. The message below her profile burned into my mind, this time, you won't escape, and I knew, with a sickening sore at my heels. The cool night air felt suffocating, thick with a dread I couldn't shake. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Emma's twisted figure creeping behind me, but the streets were empty. Still, the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. I reached my apartment and bolted the door behind me, as if that could keep her out. My hands were trembling, slick with sweat. The phone was gone, left shattered on the cold pavement where I had dropped it. But even though it was destroyed, I couldn't escape the feeling that Emma was still there, lurking just beyond my sight. Desperation clawed at me, and I started pacing. What had I done? By killing that man, I had opened a door to something far worse. Ezekiel had warned me, but now it was too late. I wasn't just haunted, I was being hunted. The next few days were a blur of sleepless nights and frantic paranoia. I could feel Emma's presence everywhere, in the shadows that moved just out of sync with the light, in the whispers that drifted through the walls of my apartment, in the static that crackled through my mind when I was alone. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, with no escape in sight. Then, one night, as I was drifting in and out of a fitful sleep, I heard it, a soft, insistent tapping at my window. My heart leapt into my throat. I lived on the 4th floor. There was no way anyone could be out there. Slowly, I turned my head toward the sound, my breath catching in my throat. The window was shrouded in darkness, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw it, a faint outline of a figure, barely visible through the thin curtain. Emma, her distorted face was pressed against the glass, her mouth moving in silent mockery of the screams I could imagine she'd be making. Her eyes, those hollow, dark eyes, bored into mine, freezing me in place. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream. The tapping grew. She were trying to force her way inside. The glass rattled in its frame, and the deep crack appeared, spreading like a spiderweb. My paralysis broke. I bolted out of bed and into the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The tapping followed me, echoing down the hallway like the footsteps of something relentless, something unstoppable. I needed to get out. I needed to find Ezekiel again, or someone, anyone, who could help. But when I reached the front door, I froze. There, on the doorknob, was a deep red smear of blood. My blood. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. Then, from behind me, I heard her voice. "You can't run, you know." I spun around, expecting to see her standing there, but there was nothing, just the empty, dimly lit hallway. But her voice echoed all around me, growing louder, more mocking. "You thought you could escape, but you're mine," she whispered, her tone venomous and possessive. "You opened the door. You let me in. And now, I'm never leaving, leave me alone." I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. "I did what you wanted. I found him for you. What more do you want?" Her laughter was cold and hollow, reverberating through the walls. "I want you," she said. "I want you to feel what I felt. The fear. The pain. The helplessness. And I won't stop until you're just like me." I stumbled backward, my hands shaking uncontrollably. She was inside my head, feeding off my terror, growing stronger with every beat of my heart. Then, the lights in the hallway flickered and went out. I was plunged into darkness, with only the sound of my own ragged breathing filling the void. "Do you remember how he killed me?" she whispered, so close now that I could feel her breath on my neck. He choked the life out of me, watching as I struggled, as I clawed at his hands, trying to breathe. He enjoyed it, you know. He enjoyed every second of my sorrow. I bolted for the door, wrenching it open and running out into the hallway. The building was dark, silent, like a tomb. I ran down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the air itself was thickening, pulling me down. As I reached the ground floor, I heard the elevator ding behind me. I glanced back, and my blood ran cold. The elevator doors slid open, revealing Emma standing there, her head cocked to one side, her twisted smile widening. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. I sprinted out of the building, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I didn't know where I was going, anywhere but here. I just needed to keep moving, to outrun the horror that was closing in on me. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right behind me, just out of sight, her cold breath on the back of my neck, her laughter echoing in my ears. Finally, I stopped, out of breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. I was in the middle of the park, surrounded by trees that loomed like dark, skeletal figures. The wind howled through the branches, whispering my name in her voice. I collapsed onto a bench, burying my face in my hands, trying to block out the sound. But it was no use. She was inside my head, inside my very soul, and there was no escape. "You can't keep running," she said, her voice gentle now, almost soothing. "I'll always find you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I'll be there." I looked up, and there she was, sitting beside me on the bench, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were no longer hollow, but filled with a burning hatred, a rage that seemed to consume everything around her. "Why are you doing this to me?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Because you made me this way," she said, her voice laced with venom. "You didn't just kill him. You became him. You enjoyed it, didn't you? The power. The control. Just like him," she continued, her smile widening. "And now, you'll suffer like I did. Over and over again, until there's nothing left of you." I screamed, the